We start on Whale Island. It's a small fishing village, it's picturesque, it's a simple town with soothing background music that eases us into the anime. And seconds into the episode, we see him. Gon is perched high up on a tree branch, quiet and intensely focused. We don't immediately get a reason for why he looks the way he does in that moment, but it sets a tone. In broadcast news, we'd call this kind of thing a handshake. It's the first impression of a character. In this sense, it's purely visual, and it frames how we see him for the rest of the episode. There's something peaceful about him. Even though he's clearly locked in on his goals, animals are around him, maybe because they trust him or maybe because he's been so still for so long, they don't even perceive him as a threat anymore. Nonetheless, visually, he's also got this big leaf on his head, and when that flies off, you can see that it has a hole in it, so it fits his head like a hat. That, clearly intentional. The rest of the leaves, I'm less sure about. I think there's an argument to say it plays into how still he's been and for how long he's been there. It got to the point where leaves just started to pile up on top of him. For me, it makes a bit more sense that way as opposed to camouflage for fishing, but I can't say for sure. At least not right now. Nonetheless, the detail that really stood out to me though is the moss on the log that he's on. Now, moss grows where there's moisture in the air, and the branch that he's sitting on, it's nearly bare on the top. That might seem small, because it is, but it's also a visual cue that Gon has been visiting this spot for a long time. It's a sign of wear and a visual cue for your brain to kind of take this idea that he's been dedicated at this for a while. As it turns out, we're told just a little bit later that he's been there for about a week trying to catch this massive fish, i.e. the master of the swamp. Very quickly after that, we learn what he's doing isn't just hard because he's a kid, it's hard period. 5 grown men can't do this. It sets up that Gon is not just brave and strong, he's also unusually capable. We're also introduced to the idea of the hunter exam, which Gon is dead set on taking, and that's also where things get a little bit more tense with Mito. Mito doesn't exactly want Gon to succeed, at least not in this particular dream. Their first real conversation is a little bit one-sided, right? Gon is elated, and he's already decided. He's not asking for permission, he is asking for affirmation. He's going to take the hunter exam. And Mito doesn't say anything, at least not right away. And she doesn't need to. She's quiet, she's pained, she knows he's leaving. Someone she's raised and has cared about is about to walk out the door. She eventually tells him his father abandoned him to become a hunter. Now this opens up a few different ways to look at Gon. Maybe he's just another shonen lead with a big lofty goal. Maybe he's a kid trying to understand why his dad left. Or maybe he's just his dad. I can't immediately tell at this point which one of those takes should take the forefront. Either way, he's leaving someone who cares about him behind. He's chasing a goal, and he's seeking answers. When Gon boards the ship, we start to see even more of his personality come through. He shows kindness to Katsuo, a crew member who drops some apples on the ship, and he ends up tossing the last apple back into the basket for him. Then, he predicts the coming storm just by smell. Now that's a clear effort to highlight some of the other things that make Gon exceptional. His strong sense of smell and his uncanny connection to nature. As the storm hits, most of the other passengers are seasick, except for Gon, Leorio, and Kurapika. Gon ends up helping again, this time an unnamed crew member, and he even recruits Katsuo to help him. Gon always seems to be able to recruit people to his side, and he's always seen trying to help. Kurapika, meanwhile, he's off to the side in a hammock, he's in his own world, he doesn't seem bothered by anyone around him. You might even go as far to say he's quite self-assured. Leorio also, he's over by himself, eating an apple. This, I think, is a little bit more foreshadowing and some visual storytelling with that green apple. Why was Katsuo carrying a huge crate of apples on the ship anyway? Well, there's actually a bit of maritime lore that green apples can help with nausea. So while it's not explained, it might suggest he knows what he's doing and he has some familiarity with some medical background, i.e. eating an apple so he doesn't get sick. He also comes off quite loud with a big presence. That's going to be Leorio in a nutshell for the entire series, basically. Soon, the three of them get called in by the ship's captain. He starts asking questions Leorio refuses to answer, and he just gets confrontational. Kurapika kind of follows the same route, but he does it kind of in a particular way. He says he could lie, but he doesn't like deception. That response is quite interesting. It's hard to say if the lying portion was somewhat aimed at Leorio or if it was just a general philosophy that he has. But the whole thing shows some level of arrogance. Kurapika gives off the vibe of someone who shows his entire hand because he doesn't think you're going to be able to beat him anyway. The captain calls them out and threatens them with not passing, and suddenly, both Kurapika and Leorio, they're up against the wall. They spill, talk about their reasons for wanting to become a hunter. For Kurapika, he wants to capture the Phantom Troop and get revenge. Now, for a guy who was being real secretive up to just a few seconds ago, he spills a lot here. And for the most part, I'm focusing on the English dub, but there's a contrast I want to look at between the dub version and the sub version. In the English dub, the captain calls Kurapika's pursuit of the Phantom Troop a suicide mission. And Kurapika says he's not afraid of death, only of time quieting the rage in his heart. There's a lot of aura in that line. It's a highly emotional response, but it makes clear this anger and mission is a big part of who he is. In the sub, the captain says Kurapika is chasing death, and Kurapika responds that he's prepared to die, but he's scared the anger within him could fade. Now, both convey that anger drives Kurapika, doubling down on that emotional resolve, but I think the sub implies something that becomes a lot clearer later on. Anger drives him, and that his whole mission is his reason for being. Who is he if he isn't trying to avenge his clan? Again, both versions make it really clear that anger drives him, and it sets the tone for his arc, I think. If he's not focused on avenging his clan, who is he? You can get some flashes of what happens in York New City from this line also. As a bit of a side, the scene also makes me wonder how Kurapika knows so much about the Hunter exam in the first place. Now, maybe it's just his intelligence of preparation, or maybe people just know more about it in general. Leorio didn't seem to know much, though. He just seemed to know what he needed to know, that he could get, some money from it. And speaking of Leorio, he gives a very simple answer. He wants money, and he lists off the things that he's going to be able to buy with it. But, based on what we'll learn later in his backstory, I think the answer is accurate, but not necessarily true. Or at least intentionally oversimplified. Now, when Kurapika implies that Leorio lacks class, things escalate pretty fast. Leorio snaps back by insulting Kurapika's entire bloodline. Now, I got the impression that Leorio sees Kurapika as self-righteous and angry. Leorio doesn't seem to concern himself with standing in someone's way, but he does seem to resent and is disgusted by Kurapika impugning his motives. Mind you, motives that Leorio might have intentionally oversimplified. But either way, to get this angry on either end, there has to be more to it. And Gon picks up on that. Underneath the yelling, these two are angry for similar reasons. They both think the other doesn't value life. Kurapika is willing to throw his away, and Leorio seemingly sees no other point to it than money. Their big fight comes to a halt before it can even start when the storm throws Katsuo overboard. Both Kurapika and Leorio react quickly to help, first with Katsuo, and then with Gon when he throws himself over to try and save Katsuo. Yes, there's some recklessness among all three of our protagonists, but there is something that binds them together. They all actually value human life. Now, we all know how aggressive the Hunter exam is going to end up being, and some of this stuff I think ultimately gets challenged. But we'll take it through step by step, episode by episode, and we'll basically try and see how much of this changes and how much of it is distinct.